Now, the first method that we are going to see here is called as the graphic rating scale. And this 360-degree feedback includes all the sources, that is from the manager, the peers, the subordinates. Now, the aim of these objectives is to see that to make the employee come closer to 100%. Performance appraisal cannot be relied every time. Why? Because they cannot understand human mindset. Good morning and welcome to the second session in Unit 4, 4th semester BBA Human Resource Management, where we're going to talk about types of performance appraisal. Now, whenever we talk about performance appraisal, there are different types, there are different methods to evaluate a person, an employee. Now, when we talk about the word performance appraisal itself, that means to say that there are certain methods on benchmarking, on finding out how you have performed onto the given organization scales. Now, the first method that we are going to see here is called as the graphic rating scale. Now, what is a graphic rating scale? This is one of the most common types of performance appraisal. It involves using a predetermined set of criteria to evaluate an employee's performance rating with an assigned value of 1 to 5 for each criteria. So what is a graphic rating scale? Which means it's going to use a predetermined methodology where you're going to have the rating scale starting from 1 to 5. Now let's assume that 1 being the topmost and 5 being the bottom. So if I say 1 is superb and 5 being less, or let's put it even vice versa, 1 being very poor and 5 being superb. Now, whichever scales you are using here, I'm going to give a value based on the components. Now, you are going to be evaluated, you're going to be judged upon, and you're going to be seen whether the candidate has performed good on all the scales that have been given. Now, this is a very old method, so this criteria method does not work every time. Why? Because there are certain areas where I would talk about where the management might feel that it is difficult to judge an employee. But nevertheless, this kind of rating will actually try to understand certain specific areas, or rather when I say that, the employee has to go through certain areas of appraisal, this method becomes easier for us to understand. Followed by which, let's go with the behavior-based appraisals. This type of appraisal focuses on specific behaviors that employees exhibit on the job. It evaluates the extent to which the desired behavior is being exhibited. Now, let me just use it to understand how this behavior-based performance comes into picture. Now, let's say that you're working in a quick service restaurant like KFC or McDonald's or whichever that comes to the top of your mind. Now, when you're working in this kind of environment, there is a whole lot of pressure acting on you, which means to say that you need to deliver the food within the stipulated time. Now, if you're not able to do it, then automatically the customer is going to shout at you, and you would be in turn completely angered by all those factors. Now, there is a set of behavior that is needed to display as per the organization. So when I'm going to put you under pressure, I still want you to maintain the normal behavior. I don't want you to get excited. I don't want you to behave irrationally. I don't want you to behave something out of the boundary. So that's where exactly I'm bringing in this methodology called as behavior-based appraisals, which means to say that the organization would have taught the employees certain set of standards which needs to be displayed, which needs to be shown to the customer at any point of time. Now, hospitality is typically a sector where you will be judged by the behavior that you exhibit towards the customers. So this kind of appraisal theory is considered to be very appropriate in certain sectors where you will be judged purely on your performance, where you will be judged purely based on the specific scenarios that you have handled. Now, moving further, we are going to talk about something even more interesting called as the 360-degree feedback. Now, this is a modern technique that has been brought into all the service industry, and this 360-degree feedback includes all the sources, that is from the manager, the peers, the subordinates. So what is 360-degree feedback? Let's talk about the age-old dialogue or the statement that says that life comes back to you in a full circle. Now, that's exactly what is going to happen in terms of this behavior performance. You are going to be evaluated by your manager, by your peers, by your subordinates, by everybody whom you interact inside the organization. So what does it mean to me? It means to say that it is a well-rounded opinion that we are going to gather about the employee, trying to understand him or her better. Now, in a 360-degree appraisal, what is very much important is that I'm not just going to look into your academic skills or your technical skills or just your communication skills. I'm going to look into you as a human being who fits into the organization from all the aspects as far as possible. In a 360-degree appraisal method, the most important thing is that we can identify those blind spots or the areas of improvement. Many a time we feel that we are good. We are good with people, we are good with handling the systems, or we are too good in terms of talking to others. But there are specific areas where we need a lot of improvement. We do not know why it happens, why we are not able to change ourselves, or why we feel that we are trying to push others out of the race. So in a 360-degree appraisal, I'm going to find out all those blind spots, try to give out a positive feedback to the employee, trying to make him or her comfortable and trying to make her understand why we need to improve on those areas. Now, everybody in the organization will watch you. They will have different perceptions about you, but that's how you need to survive inside an organization. People feel that you might be attached to one person too much. People might feel that you are doing something because you are selfish in nature. You are doing something that might be stupid in nature. You might feel that sometimes you are being judged just by your actions. But then the organization is not going to take a rapid decision just like that. We're not going to go with that one blind shot. What we are going to decide is that how an employee fits into the organization as a team member. So when you look into a person as a team member, we have got so many things to understand. We've got so many things to go ahead and start looking into it. And that's exactly where this appraisal comes in factor, which is called as a 360 degrees. So one has to have a well-rounded approach to understand how an employee performs under the given situation. Let's move further. Management by objectives. Now, this is an age-old performance technique, but nevertheless, this is supposed to be one of the best techniques, I would say. Why? Because this is going to evaluate the employee on how they meet those objectives. Now, let's start with a very, very simple example here. Let's say that you have to complete 30 files in a given month or in a given time period, which means to say that you need to complete all those 30 files and you need to submit it to your manager. Now, that is objective 1. Objective 2 can be saying that you need to meet all the files with 100% quality, error-free. Objective 3 can be saying that you need to spend 8 hours per day in the organization. So like this, I can start listing objectives for you. Now, the aim of these objectives is to see that to make the employee come closer to 100%. As human beings, we need to accept our limitations that we are not 100% perfect. We are imperfect moral characteristics, and we all believe that, some point or the other, we will make mistake. And that's quite common. We are not born to be genius at any point of time. Now, what happens here is that you start understanding the organization in a different valuation, in a different parameter altogether. Now, the first thing that we tend to do in a management by objective is that how close are you coming to the objectives that are being prescribed for you. If you're able to achieve all the objectives, that means you've understood the situation very well. The second thing is that if your objectives are good, things are fine, and you are understanding the organization needs and goals, that means you are doing it extremely well. You are understanding situations extremely well. That's exactly what makes you a hero in the organization. Now, if these goals that you are achieving and the goals of the organizations are also matching, they are coming back to you in the same circle, that means to say that your appraisal is really well. That means you are performing way above the standards that we are expecting. Now let's move further. Let's try to do the appraisal using the critical incident method, and then let's come to the self-assessment. What is a critical incident method? A type of appraisal which is based on certain critical incidents. It might be leading you to good or bad. Again, these are specific scenarios. So what happens in HR is that if these kind of scenarios are not found, or you do not encounter these kind of scenarios, that means I would not be able to judge you using this particular method. Now, for example, for a fireman, if I have to judge him by the way how he has handled a situation when there was a fire breakout in a particular area, then for me it is easier only when if it is a fire breakout happening. God forbid, if any of these kind of incidents do not happen, I cannot blame the fireman. Why? Because the critical incident did not happen here. So for me, what is very important is that this is a methodology that can be used in a rare situation. It cannot be used on a daily purpose. So critical incident can be judged only during the times of emergency. So let's move further and try to understand self-assessment. How far do you have the courage to assess yourself is what we call it as self-assessment. The moment you get a pen and a paper and they ask you to tick on all the check boxes to assess yourself, I would not feel shy for a moment. I would put a 5 on 5 for everything as I get. Because as human beings, we are irresistible. We always believe that we are born perfect. We always believe that there is no match for us. And that's exactly the problem. Why? Because in a self-assessment, we just believe that whatever we do is right. We never think about the organization. We never think about, are we meeting the exact expectation? So many other factors. But in self-assessment, what starts happening is that you tend to get an inner picture of yourself. You tend to start understanding where exactly things are moving. So there are certain set of questions which you might have not evaluated yourself, which you might have not thought about it, but today you get an opportunity to do it. So self-assessment is definitely going to be that bold step which you are going to take to assess yourself, to find yourself whether you're there, you're meeting those standards exactly. Now, essay evaluations. Now, what is essay evaluations? Providing written evaluation of an employee's performance in the form of narrative or essay. This allows a more detailed evaluation of employee performance, but more of time consuming and managers to complete. Now let's try to understand this methodology. I don't know how many of us would think that it is really good to do it, but nevertheless, this is very, very important. So let's try to understand how you have that kind of a time to write about somebody. Just for a moment, assume that you have the patience to write about somebody. Now that's going to be time consuming. Why? Because you're not just going to write one line, but you're going to write a narrative. You're going to write an essay which combines the personality traits, the behavioral traits, the communication skills, the overall skills that the person has got. So you need to have the time, you need to have the patience, and you need to have the energy to write about somebody. So this is a time-consuming methodology, but nevertheless, this is how we started understanding something called as report card. If you go back to your school days, you would understand when the teacher used to write remarks about you in the report card and asked you to get it signed by your parents. And that is the typical analysis method. Of course, the teacher might not have written about 2 or 3 pages about you, but definitely she would have written a paragraph about you. Now, that was the essay evaluation method, where we make the employee get a complete picture by writing the entire description as prescribed. And then what happens? You are able to see that the performance appraisal starts taking place. Now let's start getting into some of these appraisals combination to see how far they are good and how far they are bad. Now, as we start going, there's always a word called as criticism, and then we are subjected to criticism at every given point of time. What is the first criticism that anybody can think about? Subjectivity. Performance appraisal itself is subjectivity to the employee's thought process. We always believe that an employee is not the same when compared to others, which means to say, as our simple logic goal, all the 5 fingers in your hands are not the same. So all employees are not the same. Everybody will come under different subjectivity, subjected to different conditions. So all this performance appraisal might not give the exact answer every point of time. So this can lead to inconsistency at any given point of time. This might be also leading to unfair situations. Bias. Evaluators may always have a bias that influence their evaluations, such as personal preferences, the prejudices, and the evaluations might also contribute to discrimination at workplace. What if the manager favors a particular employee? This is always a question that runs in your mind. And it's true. Why? Because if the manager has a personal interest on somebody, let's say the manager likes a particular employee because that guy is close to him, that person is doing better, that person belongs to the same state, same language, communication, so many other factors that are coming into picture, then what happens? There can be a situation where this factor comes inside. Discrimination. You are discriminating somebody else because you like somebody else, which means you are trying to take sides which will leave the ethics of the organization in complete chaos. So let's try to understand that bias cannot be taken in as a picture for evaluation. Bias can never be allowed into performance appraisal, but that will be a very big danger. Followed by which, lack of reliability. Performance appraisal cannot be relied every time. Why? Because they cannot understand human mindset. Now, performance appraisal is just an evaluation, just like a test. Suppose a candidate fails in the examination, you cannot completely condemn the candidate saying that he is useless. He does not know anything. That's because on that particular day, if that guy did not perform in the exam, that might be subjected to so many conditions. Similarly, understanding an employee cannot be done through some graphical scales or some mathematical methods. The understanding of employee can happen only through compassion, can happen only through experience, can happen only by working side by side, which means the entire concept of understanding the employee takes time. Until and unless you give that time, you understand his capability, understand what are all his limitations, it would be thoroughly a mistaken process to judge somebody just like that. So let's understand here, the lack of reliability is always existing in any kind of performance appraisal. Now moving further, we say lack of validity, which means to say they are not accurate. For example, performance appraisal is not directly related to the job performance. Now, one thing that is very evident from a performance appraisal parameter that we are talking about is that they do not accurately measure the factors, which means to say, let's say communication. Communication is a skill that you develop over a period of time. You're not born communicator, neither you are a kind of person who remains just like that. So if I'm going to judge you based on communication and I'm just going to give you a number, let's say 2 out of 5, I might be making a mistake here. Why? Because there is no validity to that. It's only a perception that I'm putting across. So this will not be considered. You need to be accurate enough to make judgment about somebody. So performance appraisal again lacks that accuracy. It doesn't give that accurate result every point of time. So one has to be thorough in the mind. What exactly we are talking about? Is it true? Is it possible? Will it happen? Let's calculate that and then take it forward. Followed by which, negative impact on the morale. performance appraisals can sometimes have a negative impact on the employee morale, particularly if the employees are perceiving the evaluation process as unfair and they don't receive any negative feedback. So this is factoring that I would like to say here. Sometimes the unfair practices inside the organizations will definitely have a negative impact on the mindset of the employees. Why am I being subjected to this kind of a torture? Why am I being sidelined? Why am I being questioned for certain things which I have not even done? Now, this is where I would like to say performance appraisal turns out to be a nightmare to the organization. Many organizations still are completely left clueless trying to answer this question: why do some of the top performers leave the organization, or why do some of the people just quit their jobs? The reason can be because of negative performance appraisal. There's a whole lot of negativity that gets created because the morale of the employee is affected. So let's keep this in mind very, very clear, intensely clear, saying that if you are going to create something negative towards the employee, make him understand that things are on the wrong side, then automatically this is going to create a huge ruckus. So let's try to avoid that negativity inside. Now, focus on individual performance, which is very much essential because we need to concentrate on the individual performance. We need to understand if a guy is performing, why, what should be taken into account, how this guy can perform, how we can help him to do things better. All those things are mandatory. You can't take anything so lightly and say that, sir, yes, this is done. Rather, take into account all the contributions of the team, see that where that employee has focused and developed himself better. With this, let me come to the end of the session. I hope and believe that all the facts and figures that we have spoken about performance appraisal would be of a great help to you, both in terms of theory as well as in the practical walk of life. In the upcoming sessions, we would be talking about the more intrinsic topics of the HR, where we might be talking about team building, group activities, and so on. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and thank you once ahead for joining me on this wonderful session. You have a great day.